Let us see first the big picture. So I have taken a particular SoC, which is Snapdragon 835. This is slightly old. I'm sure these companies every year probably they're coming up with newer and newer SoCs. So I've taken one of them. It has many IPs. IPs, intellectual property blocks. So for example, for wireless, it has a modem, and it has multiple processors. So why will it have so many processors? Why not just one processor? See, remember, we are discussing about a mobile phone, right? That means an SoC used for a mobile phone. Now, why it has so many processors? Yes, Anupam.
Sir, these are for different tasks, sir. Basically, one would be for altitude or something. One would be for related to GPS related tasks. Third one would be for some other application and all. So that's why we go for different kind of processors for.
Why not one processor only?
Sir, clubbing all things in one processor would be a little tedious task, sir. And then the whole concept design would have to be changed also, sir.
Yeah. See, the whole idea of the whole foundation of this course is about accelerators, right? That means instead of just using one monolithic accelerator for everything, let us have specialized or custom purpose accelerator for each type of workload or each type of input. So that now in mobile phone nowadays, mobile phones are not just used for audio communication; they are used for practically everything, right? For training or education and all kind of. For example, people at registration desk or booth, all they have is a mobile phone. With that, they can do everything. They can take your photo. They can do everything. So in this way, you can see they are really multi-purpose. So they process audio data. They take your location, GPU processing, camera, CPU, security processor, and so on. So that's why you need multiple processors. Out of them, we are discussing about Hexagon DSP. Why? Because see, we have discussed about CPU to some degree. We have not discussed a lot of detail, but to some degree, we have discussed about CPU, we have discussed about GPU, and some more accelerator. In Qualcomm's Snapdragon, DSP gives best performance for AI workloads. So that's the reason. Okay, but it is under certain conditions or certain constraints. So let us see that. So this is just it's not to scale. This is just kind of a rough illustration of the floor plan. Now this is just a illustration, logical illustration. So it has a DSP for doing compute, and it has a DSP for modem. Okay, for like network communication. We are not interested in that this kind of DSP. We are discussing in DSP, which performs the computations. Okay, and it has some more DSP for low power island. So for example, like there are some sensors which always have to be on. Even if you are not using a mobile phone, it always has to receive the incoming call. So for that, you need a certain always on kind of functionality has to go on. But anyway, our focus is this compute DSP. Now it can perform audio computation, voice computation, other processing, but especially we are, as you can expect, we are more interested in those computations which are relevant for AI. Okay, now this is the architecture of how different processors connect with each other. Here it is GPU. Here we have 4-core CPU, which has an L2 cache. Now it has a memory controller. And now you can see we are back to that question, the main memory type, right? So why LPDDR? Because it is a low power DRAM device, low power DRAM memory. Okay, so here we have GPU. So this is the memory controller. Now this is the Hexagon DSP. When we discussed about GPU architecture, we said this first point that GPU has its own memory, which is called device memory, and CPU has its own memory called host memory. Okay? So the point is, in the high-end processors, we have a discrete CPU, or we have a discrete GPU, where GPU comes with its own memory. Here, in mobile phones, we don't have that much power budget. We don't have those powerful GPUs. We have somewhat simple GPUs. Here, the main memory is shared between not just CPU, GPU, but even DSP. Now, what is so? But DSP is programmable. So DSP is not like an ASIC. Okay, although it is programmable, but at the same time, it is also not fully programmable like a CPU. It is somewhat rigid in design, and they are designed to do a limited number of tasks well. That means it is somewhat between FPGA and ASIC. ASIC is like not at all programmable. FPGAs are really programmable. But here, DSPs, they are programmable to some degree, but they can be programmed to do only a limited number of things. DSP cannot replace a CPU. So just because it is programmable doesn't mean you can do everything that you can do with CPU. You cannot do everything of that with DSP. Okay. Now DSPs are more focused on instruction level parallelism. That means, see, DSPs have only 1 or 2 cores. Right? See, even in high-end CPU, the trend is towards using more and more number of cores, like 16, 32, 64. Right? And of course, in GPU, you have massive multi-threading. That means you have thousands of threads. In DSP, we don't have that situation. DSPs are designed for low power budget. Okay, DSPs are designed for mobile processors, right? In the mobile, if you remember, our power budget was just 3 watts, right? If you remember in smartphone. So within that, now the 3-watt power budget has to be shared between CPU, GPU, DSP, and so on, right? That means, in any case, the power consumption of DSP cannot be more than 3 or 5 watts. So within that power budget, you have to do everything. So that's why you can't have a lot of threads. Here they just have single core, and within single core you can have focus on instruction level parallelism. Now, unlike GPU, DSP does not have hundreds of cores or threads, right? If you remember, GPUs have thousands of threads. Okay, it has a grid has a block has a thread. And we discussed some example where it has many number of threads. But here, DSPs does not have so many threads. Okay, so DSPs are like very small devices, unlike high-end GPUs, which have thousands of threads. It is just designed for a very small power budget. Now, many companies may design DSP, but here we discuss about Hexagon DSP. So basic idea of DSP is that it uses VLIW architecture. Okay, we had discussed VLIW architecture last time. So basic idea of Hexagon, the foundation is same, and on top of that, they have done some improvements. So Hexagon DSP IC improves control code efficiency over traditional VLIW. So one of the limitations of VLIW was, if you remember, was that like we have to insert knobs, and we have to be able to find instructions which are independent of each other. Okay, but so here they have done some optimization to improve the control code efficiency. I'm not going to into a lot of details of that. So here the idea is, let us pack more instructions in each VLIW packet so that the number of knobs are reduced. Right? See, if we have a lot of knobs, it's a waste. Okay, if we have a lot of knobs inserted in our VLIW instruction, it is a waste of resources. Fine. So here the idea of Hexagon DSP is that they have done some optimization so that they can pack more instructions in each VLIW packet so that they have less number of knobs. So this reduces performance loss due to idle or stall threads. Because if there are knobs, that is like idle thread, right? Knob means no operations. That means effectively idle thread. Further, it uses clock gating to achieve near perfect power scaling with number of threads. So someone from EC background will have more idea about what is clock gating, but for other students' benefit, see, clock gating or power. I mean, clock gating means when you don't want a computation to be done, you just you do gating of the clock, so that if a hardware is not being utilized, why power it on? Okay, so if you don't have any task to do, just power gate it. So that's the idea. So in this way, you spend only as much energy as you are doing computation. If you are doing computation with only one thread, then just spend energy on one thread. If you are doing computation with two threads, just spend energy on two threads. That's the idea of gating. That's the idea of near perfect power scaling. Now it implements zero latency round robin thread scheduling. So that means, so everybody knows what is round robin, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then again 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Round robin goes like that. That means there is no priority scheduling. Every thread gets its own chance to get scheduled. That's the idea of round robin. So once it completes one packet, it goes to the next packet. That means the instruction. It's not a single instruction; it's a VLIW instruction, which is like, for example, one VLIW instruction may have 6 scalar instructions or 6 individual instructions. So it will do next execution, and that switching happens with zero latency. So these are the rough. These two slides which I mentioned here, they give you a quick idea of what a DSP is. More details will be explained in a later slides. So what are the benefits of DSP? So see, next question is, why can't we just use CPU or GPU instead of using DSP? Why can't we use CPU or GPU? So now the answer is, see, in every domain, in every, like for high-end, high-performance computing, where your power budget is suppose 20,000 watts, or where your power budget is 3 watts. Every domain or every application area has its own constraints and its own optimization objectives, right? At the suppose if you are using Cerebrus wafer scale engine, your power budget may be like 20,000 watts. There you are looking for very quick training time. You want to train a neural network. Here in mobile, you can't train a network, right, with 3 watt power budget, because training is very, very intensive. It takes a lot of power to train a neural network. So you can't obviously do it on a mobile phone. So here your constraint is mostly you want to do either you want, if you want to do AI computation, you want to do only inference. You don't want to do training, right? So this is an example of how every area has its own positives or constraints and objectives. So here we are mostly focusing on multimedia application, as I already said. But here this slide also shows modern applications. What is the here the requirement is that we will need a fixed real-time performance level, because if you're running an application on a mobile phone, you expect some quality of service. For example, if you're doing some video playback, the frame should not play very, very slowly. Otherwise, people will become upset. They will throw away their mobile phone, get a new one. Nowadays, it's very easy, right? So you sell your old one to somebody, get a new one. So we don't want that. So, and the power and area targets are very aggressive. Okay, as I said, your mobile phone has just 5 watt or 3 watt power budget. Similarly, area is also very small because you have to put so many IPs. Now, what are the characteristics of these applications? So multimedia apps have significant control code in the RTOS's real-time operating system and frameworks. So what is control code? What is signal processing code? So see, if you remember so just bring in your mind any C++ code or maybe whatever Python code or any code that you might have observed. So first of all, there are initialization, right? You read a file. Okay, you set the variables, or you set the array. Okay, you set up everything. Then the actual kernel starts. For example, it could be Jacobi, or it could be like an image processing, Sobel edge detection, or whatever. Any computation happens. Finally, once your computation is done, you output the result either to the terminal or to the file, and then you close. Okay, so that your main kernel, like either Jacobi or whatever, signal processing or image processing, That is referred to as a signal processing code, and control code refers to your code which is not doing the direct computation, such as if else or switch. Okay, so any code which involves branch predictors and so on. So this is called control. So control code means control code means it doesn't do the actual computation. Okay, it doesn't do the actual computation, but here that part of code is required. Still, it is required for doing all the control operations. Okay, so now the point is, if multimedia applications only have a suppose 99% signal processing, then it is fairly straightforward. You can just use the GPU. But they have a mix of both control code and signal processing code. So control code is mostly serial. It's not highly parallel. It's mostly serial. Okay, whereas multimedia code is parallel. So you have a mix of serial code and parallel code. So for serial code, CPU is good. For parallel code, GPU is good. But because it has both, either you have the situation where you use CPU for serial code and offload your parallel part on GPU, then there will be a lot of data transfer overhead. But if you can just use DSP, if you can use a DSP, then it can run both control code and signal processing code. That is the benefit of DSP. Okay, so that is the idea. And plus, there will be a lot of L2 cache. So this $ is used for cache. Okay, these people like the $. So that's why they have used this $ for cache. So as you know, there is L1 cache, L2 cache, L3 cache, and so on. Of course, here there is no L3 cache, but we have L1 cache and L2 cache. So multimedia code is data intensive and modern is code intensive. So that means you have a lot of L2 cache misses also. So DSP is designed so that you can try to have you can try to minimize this L2 cache misses. See, the point is, GPU architecture is good in certain situations, but here all those conditions are not being met. If multimedia code was purely signal processing code without much control code, you can use DSP. You can just use GPU. But here that condition is not fulfilled. That's why you have to use DSP because you have a lot of L2 cache misses, and you don't have a lot of threads, right? GPUs all depend on massive parallelism, so you can switch to another thread once. If one thread is busy, you can switch to another thread, whereas that condition is not being met here. So that's the idea. So here, Hexagon DSP uses VLIW. VLIW is by definition multi-issue. That means you have multiple instructions in the same VLIW packet. You issue all of them in parallel. If you have all the functions, suppose you have 6 instructions. If you have 6 functional units, then all those instructions can work in parallel. Okay. Now here we have multi-threading. We don't have massive multi-threading, but we do have some multi-threading. That means one core has 2 or 3 threads. To reduce L2 cache miss penalty without the need for a larger L2 cache. So that's why you have multi-threading. And it increases instructions per VLIW packet because compiler doesn't need to schedule latency. Okay, so the whole point is, see, the point is, there are certain latency hiding mechanisms. Okay, as you know, L1 cache or L2 cache, they take maybe like 2 cycles to 5 cycles or 10 cycles latency, whereas main memory takes 100 cycles or 200 cycles. So any access to main memory is very, very slow. Okay, any access to main memory is very, very slow. So you need some mechanism to hide that latency. Okay, so for example, like suppose here I want some book from library. So now it takes a lot of time for me to get some book in library. So what I will do, either suppose I need a book of computer architecture. So one option is I keep on waiting. It takes maybe 1 week to get the book. So will I not do anything for 1 week? No, right? That's the loss of waste of efficiency. So one option is, while I'm waiting for computer architecture, I can read another topic, maybe networks. Okay, let us do something else also. Probably I have 2 research areas. One research area I have is on computer architecture. Another research area I have is on computer networks. I switch between them. If one of them is not showing any progress, suppose paper is rejected or whatever, book comes late, I can switch to computer networks. Okay. Another option is we can have a department library. Okay. Department library can have some books so that instead of 7 days, my wait time reduces to just maybe 3 hours. Both these options are possible, right? So multi-threading means you have so many threads that if one thread is waiting, you switch to another thread. In this way, you don't have just one task at your hand. You have multiple tasks. Even if one task is slow, you can switch to another thread. And by the time you are doing second task, maybe the first task will get done, and then you can again come back to first task. So that is like multi-threading. And L2 cache is even before you go to main memory, you have something L2 cache on chip, just like our department library that is on campus. Or sorry, no, not just within the same department building. So I have much less time to reach to the department building. Okay, so CPUs primarily use L2 the cache for hiding latency. GPUs primarily use massive multi-threading for hiding the latency. Of course, they also have caches to something, but their main mechanism is multi-threading. Now here in DSP, because we are able to use somewhat multi-threading, we don't need to have a lot of L2 cache. It is just that because most of the faculty members here, they have multiple research topics. That's why department library is not so overly utilized. Okay, people once in a while people go there, but even if department library is not functioning, people still can do something else. So it's not that everything is getting stopped. And by use of multi-threading, we are able to do more within each VLIW packet. Okay, with each VLIW packet, we are able to do more once because we have multi-threading. And if you are able to do more work with each VLIW packet, then your energy is saved, your pipeline is kept full. Okay. So, so this, you can ignore this part, MIPS per mm square. MIPS is the million instructions per second. So it shows how much mm square is the area. That means within each unit area, how many instructions are you able to do? Okay. So once, because of many techniques that Hexagon DSP has proposed, because of which they are able to improve the instructions per cycle. Now let us see the DSP features, some more DSP features. So similar to FPGA, it runs at low frequency to keep power consumption low. For our presentation on, that DVS and DVFS, right? So what is the typical frequency that an FPGA runs? If you remember the brainwave or a typical frequency range I told you for FPGA. Some of you may have used FPGA. Tell me, what is the frequency you have used it for? Anyone? Any guess? What is the frequency of CPU? What is the frequency of GPU? Anybody remembers the range? What is the frequency of TPU? The lecture number lecture number was.
Sir, CPU would be around 1 gigahertz, sir. 1 to 2 gigahertz.
CPU, okay. That was L32. The one which I hope I have discussed already. Yeah, so CPU
Yes, sir,
is 1 to 2 gigahertz. Tell me. What about GPU? What about TPU?
So it would be lesser than that, sir. It will be in megahertz, sir. Somewhere in 100 megahertz.
You're saying that is for TPU?
Yes, for this, sir. Yes, sir. For GPU, sir. Not for TPU, sir, but for GPU. TPU, I don't remember, sir. GPU is somewhere between 200 to 900 megahertz.
No, it's all wrong. It's all wrong. Okay. Okay, anyone else? Sagar, Priyansh?
Sir, for FPGA, it is around 200 megahertz.
Very good, very good. Yeah, you are from EC. Good. Okay, good. Yeah, so for FPGA, it is between like 100 to 500 megahertz kind of. And for CPU, like you may have used like desktop CPUs. Yeah, see, your Anupam, the value 2 gigahertz is slightly on lower side. Usually, if you see some of the server CPUs, they have 3.4 gigahertz or 2.4 gigahertz. 1 gigahertz I don't see too much, right? Maybe mobile phone may have, but CPU may not have 1 gigahertz nowadays. TPU was less than 1 gigahertz, right? So TPU version 1 was 740 something, and even TPU version 2 and 3, they are less than 1 gigahertz. GPU that we studied, they were around 1.4 gigahertz. That means 1400 megahertz or 1400 or 1500 megahertz. So similarly here, this DSP also runs at low frequency to keep power consumption low. And it achieves high throughput by multi-threading. Now, HVX is hexagon vector extensions or DSP extensions for AI and computer vision. It has 4 scalar threads, right, which work in parallel for VLAW operations in multiple contexts. So this context is same as threads. So here, see, it has. So here we have 4-way VLAW. Okay. So we have 4 parallel scalar threads. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the 4 parallel scalar threads, and then we have 4-way VLAW. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, L1 cache is shared between them. Okay, so here you can see L1 cache is shared between them. Fine. Now, each thread is 500 megahertz. So total scalar performance is 2 gigahertz. Okay, so this is just traditional VLAW. Now here we have this 2 HVX context. Actually, this HVX context is not same as threads. So here we have VLAW operation is separate and HVX operation is separate. This is the HVX, 2 HVX context. So this is 1 HVX, this is another HVX. And this is 4-way VLAW. This is 1 way, 2nd way, 3rd way, 4th way. Each of the way has 4 threads, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So now these contexts, we call them context, they are controllable by any 2 scalar threads. So for example, this is controllable by this. This is controllable right now. This yellow means it is controlled by this. HVX context is controlled by this. This HVX is controlled by this. Okay. So here we get 500 megahertz per thread. So we get 1 gigahertz total vector performance. So because here it is only 2. Okay, and other 2 threads can do scalar work. So when, for example, when this thread is controlling this HVX context and this is controlling this HVX, then we are counting the performance of only this and this, and these 2 remaining 2 can that time do scalar work, some of the scalar work. Okay, it can do scalar work. Now, HVX unit and the scalar unit, they can be used simultaneously. So actually, now you see it's a very not so straightforward. It's some very complex kind of why it has both scalar and parallel vector and so on. So here, this is the scalar unit, and this is the HVX unit. Both of them can be simultaneously used. So this allows the DSP to juggle multiple execution unit or a single instruction and perform multiple integer and fixed point operations, because it can do both scalar operation and HVX operation. Okay, so multi-threading works well for VLAW. So here you can see there are 4 threads in each. That is the multi-threading. As multi-threading hides pipeline latency and enables better utilization of VLAW packets. So I already mentioned how VLAW packet utilization is improved with multi-threading. And with multi-threading, you can service multiple apps. Now people are using so many apps at the same point of time. Many of them are only one of them is in foreground, and others are probably running in background or in parallel. So you can have multiple of them served using multi-threading approach. So just as I gave the example of desktop, like in desktop, you may have Microsoft Word, running Teams, Excel, PowerPoint, all of them are simultaneously open, maybe browser. So maybe one thread is taking care of each of those applications or apps. Okay, now let us focus on HVX architecture. We are now focusing more on this architecture. So here we have this vector registers. Okay, so we have 32 vector registers. Each vector register is 1024 bit. Okay, these are 1024 bit vector registers. Here, this one, each of them. Okay, so now we have 1024 bit SIMD, and we have 4 vector slot VLAW. So now you can see it's really getting very, very complex. So we have this. See, this is 1024, and we have this into 4, 1024 into 4. Okay, so total we can get 4096 result bits per cycle. Okay, so this is with each HVX context. So right now I'm only talking about one HVX context, and it operates. So first thing about the Snapdragon 835 hexagon DSP in that Snapdragon is it has no floating point support. It will be apps. So it has no floating point support. It has only fixed point support. So because of the use of fixed point, right? Because of the use of fixed point, the energy consumption is lower. Right? Floating point takes more energy, more latency. Here it takes less latency. Okay, so it can support either 8-bit, 16-bit, or 32-bit fixed point. So it lowers air and energy consumption. In many of the mobile phone applications, they don't need floating point, or they can tolerate. If you remember my approximate computing presentation, which was presentation the lecture number 1, our main idea was many multimedia applications, image processing applications, they are error tolerant. And based on that idea, we are using this approach where we don't have any floating point support. We just have fixed point. Okay. Now let us see the memory. So now these vector units, they don't go through L1 cache. They directly go to the L2 cache. Okay. They go through the L2 cache. So I will not discuss everything that is there on this slide. So for this vector units, for these HVX units, L2 cache is the first cache. It doesn't go through the L1 cache. So the point is the L1 cache will be smaller, L2 cache will be larger. So instead of first going to L1 cache, see, here we have very wide vectors, but L1 cache is very small. So what is the point of going to L1 cache? Directly go to the L2 cache, right? See, suppose I need 20 books at one point of time, then I will not go to department library. I will go to institute library. That's there is a retail shopkeepers, who supply in bulk, right? If you go ask them, I want one soap, they will say no, go away from here. They only take bulk orders because it's a waste for them. So this is roughly the idea. Similarly here, because vector sizes are so large, there is no point in going to a small cache. Let us go directly to a big cache. Yeah. So okay, so large primary memory to hold image data reduces tiling overhead seen on L1 cache. So here, instead of using L1 cache, we are using a large primary memory, which is L2 cache. So it reduces tiling overhead. And access from L2 cache is very fast. We can get very high bandwidth. Programming is also easy. We keep L1 and L2 cache coherent. Okay, so I'm skipping the rest of the part. Sorry. Now, Snapdragon devices with hexagon DSP can stream data directly from imaging sensor to the DSP's local memory. So here, let us see that where is that imaging sensor. Yeah, imaging sensor. Does it have imaging sensor? Maybe it will have some, not here. Does it have imaging sensor? So here, like see, it has multiple engines. I think the imaging sensor. Here also it's mentioned audio, location, EPU, camera, CPU, security. No, here it doesn't show, but here, see here, you can just see here. So it will have one engine for video, one for imaging, one for display. Okay, so now one option is that suppose we have suppose we have one more sensor here. So one option is I send the data to DRAM cache, so DRAM memory, and from DRAM memory it comes to DSP. Another option is it can directly do the data transfer and bring the data into L2 cache, so that DSP can directly operate on it. So that is the option which is we are mentioning here, that we don't have to first transfer the data to main memory and then move it to the L2 cache. We can directly copy the data from imaging sensor. Okay, sensor. So see here we have. Let me go back here. Here we have only audio. Maybe some of them are camera, display, JPEG, video, others. So for example, suppose this sensor, it can directly copy the data to L2 cache without going through this memory controller. So you are not disturbing the memory controller. Now let us see the similarity and differences between DSP and CPU. So now you see scalar core is good for serial code. Whenever you have serial code, then scalar core is good. And whenever you have parallel computation, then vector kind of vector core is good. Now many applications have both scalar code and vector components. Okay, so because DSP has this scalar core, right? It has this scalar threads. So using them, you can get good performance for control code. That means control code means I gave example, right? File initialization and just data movement, output. So for them, you can get good performance using this scalar threads. Okay. And whatever is your parallel code, that you can accelerate using this HVX. You can use this HVX to accelerate parallel code, and you can use this scalar part to accelerate the scalar or serial code. So in this way, everything can be done on DSP itself. You don't have to move some of the computations on CPU. DSP itself is able to accelerate both CPU, both serial and parallel. Whereas, if you remember our GPU, NVIDIA GPUs, they were not good at serial code. They were so highly optimized for parallel code that whenever you get serial code, you get very poor performance. Okay, so it is just like you have heard of the term like jack of all and master of one, or master of none, all those codes, right? So jack of all means just like CPU. CPU can do many things averagely. It is not especially good at anything. So here the idea of DSP is that it should be able to do scalar also to some degree well, and parallel computation also to some degree. That's what it does. Here on purpose we have kept some processor resources using that scalar threads, which can give good performance for control. And we have that HVX context to accelerate the parallel part also. Okay, so in this way we can do everything. We can offload the full algorithm for DSP. It's not that we have something reserved, something kept on CPU, something for DSP, and so on. We don't have to worry about that. Let DSP do everything. So our data transfer overhead is reduced. We can keep the data local in cache, in the DSP's cache. You don't have to move the data between CPU and DSP, CPU, DSP. So even if a code is such that it has some vector code, even if an application has some vector, then scalar, then vector dependency, there is no problem. Let DSP do everything. Keep the data in L2 cache. It will do everything. So CPU can be completely kept far away. That means we don't have to use CPU. So our CPU power is saved. Okay. So in this way, we have this benefit of having both scalar code. We are able to run scalar code also and parallel code also. So any questions here? Any questions? I hope you got the idea, right? Why we have both scalar code and HVX, scalar cores or scalar threads and vector threads. HVX context, which has vector registers. Now, in conventional design, this is again repeat of what we've already said. CPU handles control code and GPU handles your computation, which are more parallel. Whereas in DSP, control code processor on DSP can run into parallel with computation code on HVX. So that the scalar thread we are calling as control code processor. This allows tight coupling of control and computation. So result of computation can be used by a control code decision in the next clock cycle. Whereas if you do half things on CPU, half things on DSP, then it takes time to transfer data. Whereas here, everything is done on the DSP itself. So whatever control decision is taken, that affects the computation in the next cycle itself. Whatever computation is done, it can be used for making some control decision in the next cycle itself. That's called tight coupling. You don't have to wait. Okay, so there are some similarity between CPU and hexagon DSP. So we have discussed about SIMD. So here we have multi-threaded programming. CPU has some amount of multi-threading with cache-based coherent shared memory. Here also we have coherent shared memory. We have SIMD instructions on vector RF and scalar instructions on scalar RF. This is same. And it has good control performance for mixed vector scalar and good control performance for mixed vector and scalar. So this is the idea of CPU, this is the idea of GPU. So there are some similarities between CPU and GPU. However, there is also difference. So here, see here, remember this is the quad CPU, which is again mobile CPU. It is not an Intel CPU. It's a mobile CPU. So here it has only 128-bit SIMD. Okay, and in high-end Intel CPUs, you now also have 512-bit SIMD. Whereas here you have 1024-bit SIMD, and that also you have 4 pipelines. Whereas here, this is the mobile, here only 1 pipeline per CPU is there. So overall, you get 8x compute per cycle. Because 128 into 8 is 1024. Okay. Now SIMD threads, here they have, now in CPU they go through the small L1 cache. Whereas here they don't go through L1 cache, they directly go into L2 cache. Of course, here we are double quotes means it is the first level of cache, but it is actually it is L2 cache, right? This is, as I said here, if you remember, this vector here, L2 is the first level of memory for vector units, and this is 512. This vector accesses, they don't go through L1 cache, they directly go to L2 cache. Whereas on CPU, vector registers accesses go through L1 cache first and then through L2 cache. Okay. So here it is SIMD thread go through the L1 cache, but here they directly go to the L2 cache. And here in SIMD, it can also do floating point computation. Here it can do only fixed point computations. That's why it has lower area and power. So floating point takes more area, more power, but here it takes on less area, less power. So now, where does DSPs consume power? It consumes a lot of power for logic and clocks. That is a useful, that means for useful work. And clock doesn't take much power, leakage take very less power. So here, unlike CPUs, the bulk of the power is spent on compute data path, right? This is the HVX data path. Okay, that means most of the power is spent for useful purposes, whereas on CPU, most of the power is spent for L2 caches or leakage or clock. Okay, that is a waste of resources. Is it clear till this point? What are the crucial differences between or similarities between? So although both CPU and DSP, they are both using SIMD, but DSP is using much wider SIMD. And here on DSP, it doesn't access L1 cache, it directly accesses L2 cache. Now in CPU, we have out of order and we have superscalar, and here we have in order with VLIW architecture. Here we have only short vectors such as 128-bit. Here we have long vectors, 1024-bit. That's why your overhead of vectorization is reduced. Here we use both L1 and L2 cache. Here we use only L2 cache. Here the CPU design uses high frequency, which incurs high power consumption. Here it has low power consumption because of the low frequency. That means its overhead is less. So let us see some results. So any questions? I hope you got the idea. So the point is because we are designing the DSP for lower power consumption, that's why by design, okay, that's why by design it runs at low frequency. It doesn't support floating point. It uses only L2 cache, and it doesn't support complex features which also take power, such as out of order and superscalar. Rather, it uses in order and VLIW. So in order definitely consumes much less power than out of order. Although out of order can provide you probably good performance, but here they achieve it using VLIW architecture and by using much wider SIMD. So here they have shown that compared to their own CPU and their own GPU, DSP gives you much higher energy efficiency, much better performance. Of course, assuming that you can work with fixed point. If fixed point is not acceptable, then you can't even use DSP. So here they have shown that for certain, some benchmarks compared to quad CPU, this is 1 to 3x faster, and energy per pixel reduction is also there between 4 to 18 times. The limitation is that, of course, DSP is good only for inference; it is not for training. It supports only fixed point, which may degrade accuracy. And so that means once you are using fixed point, you have to quantize your model, right? From floating point, you have to quantize it to fixed point. So that takes effort, that takes time. Sometimes it is not even possible. Sometimes it leads to unacceptable accuracy loss. For example, in neural network, if you try to move from floating point to fixed point, it will lead to large loss in accuracy. So then you can't use DSP at all. So, and any questions till this point? I hope you got the overall idea. What are some similarities between CPU and DSP? What are the limitations of DSP? But what are the strong points of DSP? What is the core philosophy of DSP? That it should have good performance for both scalar and parallel. Whereas in GPU, the philosophy is don't worry about scalar performance. Just focus on parallel performance. For scalar performance, we'll just use CPU. And because GPU provides you the NVIDIA GPU provides you so much high performance that a small performance loss on serial code is easily acceptable. Right? Now, let me go through these results on AI benchmark. So if you can actually go to this link. So they have actually designed some AI benchmark which are supposed to run on mobile phones. That means these benchmarks are not for high-end processor, but specifically for mobile phones. So on these what you call the benchmarks, here is the performance of different accelerators. So here I've discussed somewhat older, as I said, 835. I think that the leading one is this Hexagon 690. So here it takes it gets this much performance compared to this 835 has this much performance. Okay, so this just tells you that it gives you an idea of different. So actually, as you know, Exynos, MediaTek, HiSilicon, these are different companies. Unisoc, Tiger. These are different companies which are coming up with their own. Some of them are NPU, some of them are GPU. So this is the quantized performance. Okay, quantized means it is on fixed point. If you put floating point, then DSP is out, right? That DSP will not be there in the list because DSP does not support floating point. So on quantized performance, Snapdragon 855 is the leader. 35 and 835 is somewhat lagging behind. But others, they are using, some of them are using, they are calling it APU, some of them call it NPU, some of them just have APU and so on, some of them have GPU. So in this way, they have their own place in the competition. These are the references.